2 years into that process, I became severely ill, and it was to the point where I was bedridden. It made it all the way up to my diaphragm, displaced some organs. The endometriosis was attacking certain places in the body. I was just in excruciating pain as they were trying to remove it. And I remember thinking in my head, I was just trying to stay conscious. And I had a thought in my head, you're going to have a seizure. I trusted God. And I think it was not letting any type of fear overtake me or make me think that I'm not going to be here to see my children.
Welcome back to Legacy Talk 3N, where our story becomes a mirror for your future. Today's episode is raw, it is uncut, but it's necessary. It is unfiltered. We're talking today about a woman who has a story from the womb to war room. It's a mother's fight for life. It's her fight for legacy. Because sometimes the place where life is formed also becomes the place where life is tested. And sometimes what should be a celebration turns into survival. And sometimes the promise comes, but there's no way the promise will get there without a fight. So today, for the viewing audience, you will hear the story of a woman who endured years of infertility due to having endometriosis that was found later on. She pressed through the cruelness of IVF, and then she gave birth to a beautiful son. And then she found herself minutes later fighting for her life, from the womb to war. This isn't just her story. Today, this story is for every woman who's waiting. The woman in the process. It's for the woman wondering if she'll survive what it took to actually give birth to the promise that God had given her. Here at Legacy Talk 3N, we believe that our story shapes others' future. And because if God brought somebody else through it, then we can believe and we can know that He's going to bring us through it. So wherever you're listening from, I'm going to just ask you to lean in and get ready, because with the conversation today, I'm more than sure that there is hope. I'm sure that there is healing, and that I'm absolutely positively sure that there is life after being in your war room. So we're going to get ready to have a powerful, again, unfiltered conversation with a woman who has a story to tell. Shanell, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And before we begin any question or the conversation, I would like you to share with our viewing audience what life looks like for you right now.
Hello to our audience today. My life looks like a servant for the Most High God. I am a devout Christian and a servant for the Lord. I am a mother now and a wife, and I am someone who is currently focusing on ways to take that pain and experience and bring healing and restoration to others. So we have a few things in the works now. Book and prayer ministry, and continuing to serve in ministry to take things to the next level.
Oh, I love it. Thanks for sharing that, just to give them a feel for who you are right now and what's on the horizon to come next. Your story is so powerful, and it's such a beautiful story that when I was just thinking about where we would go today, I looked at it as a beautiful story, and we know that there will be sequels to come as the book is published, as the powerful prayer ministry that God is giving you to birth is in process. And so I'm quite sure this won't be our last time hearing from you. But as I was thinking of your, I don't call it interview, as I was looking to have the covenant conversation that we have when we're here, I began to think about it like a movie, because it's such a beautiful story. And so we're going to go into Act 1. And Act 1 is going to be about the womb. And we're talking today about hope. We're talking today about patience. We're talking today about waiting. And so the first question I want to ask you is, before your diagnosis of endometriosis, before the infertility, what did the thought of motherhood and what was to come as it pertained to motherhood, what did that look like for you ahead of time?
Yeah, ahead of time, I mean, I think what most women would anticipate, you have your husband. I felt like I had been faithful to God and the things He had required me to do. And so I was just ready for building a family and looking forward to us just doing things together, serving God together, and being able to bring life into the world and nurture a child or children. So I think it was very similar to what most women would think of.
Absolutely. Well, when you were diagnosed with such a severe case of endometriosis, exactly what did the doctor say and how did this affect you emotionally?
Well, initially, I was diagnosed after trying to have children for a while. And during that first diagnosis, I was just told you have a surgery. And then after that, you would just continue trying. And most women get pregnant after that. So um, I went through the surgery, and I still was having some health concerns, and those things still persisted, but I really didn't think anything of it. I just, continued to try. And I would say 2 years into that process, I became severely ill, and it was to the point where I was bedridden. It happened so fast. But I couldn't get out of bed. I just felt like the life was being drained from me. I remember on my 33rd birthday, I went to the doctor after going to several doctors at this point just to see what was going on. I was having so many different symptoms that even went outside of what you would think endometriosis would entail. So I was having gastro issues. I was having just so many different things. And I went to that appointment, and my doctor pretty much told me that there was nothing else she could really do. I asked if there was someone she could refer me to. She said, no, your only option is to stay on birth control, which I felt like was making things worse. And at this point, I couldn't even eat. I couldn't keep food down. I was losing weight. My family and friends were very concerned. And at this point, it went from trying to get pregnant to trying to regulate my body and actually live. And so all of that, looking into even IVF, that was something that we were told could help in this process, but I was not even thinking about IVF at that point. I was just thinking about my
Maybe.
life.
Absolutely. And I was one of the ones who was afforded the opportunity to watch the story unfold. And indeed, I know it's going to touch many lives. As we end Act 1 of this story today, tell me this. What were the silent battles during those years of infertility that were there that nobody ever saw?
Yeah. So whenever you're going through a health issue, and I have to include other health issues in with infertility in this conversation, because when you're going through health issues, they can take a toll on your identity. So there were times where I struggled with low self-esteem. There were times where, being married, when you're sick, your appearance changes. Um, Hair loss, weight, either some people lose weight, some people gain weight. And so those things became very real for me. I remember even having concerns, even socially, when you think about the things you give up when you don't feel well, you have to sit out on so much and everyone else is living their lives and you're kind of off on the sidelines. So along with dealing with infertility and, your identity as a woman, because I feel like when you get that diagnosis, you feel that, or at least I did, you start to feel like your womanhood is being challenged. This is a key feature of our sex. We're supposed to be able to reproduce. We want to provide children for our husband, and this is a part of our function. And for me not to be able to do that, you almost feel devalued or defective in some sense, like something is really wrong with you. And so I had to really pray and seek God about reclaiming my identity in Him, because my identity is, even though being a woman is a part of my identity, my true identity is anchored in God. And I had to go back and relearn what that meant, that everything that I get is from God. And regardless of what is said, regardless of what diagnosis is received, I had to start to shift the perspective of myself and my self-image into what God sees and what He says about me. And that was able to help me make it through many things, even hurdles from, mental health, because it's very stressful. You have the financial burdens of many doctor appointments and medical bills and surgeries and things like that. So it affects you on many different levels. And I think, too, one thing that people did not see is that not only was it um, a battle against something like infertility, but for me, I knew that the reason for the infertility was something much deeper, and it was actually a spiritual battle. And it wasn't just for me, it was for me and my children to come. So.
Yes, that's good. Let's look at, as we go into Act 2, and Act 2 we'll call the waiting room. And so in the waiting room, we're going to talk about IVF and faith. What actually led you to the decision of having IVF? And with answering this question, how were you able to merge a medical diagnosis or with your faith and your hope?
Yeah, I think that this experience has taught me that there actually is a lot of overlapping when we think about health with medicine, and we just don't quite have that understanding. So I have been in the medical field for over 20 years, so I've seen many things. And when you're going through it yourself and going through it for such a long time, there were times where I really had to educate myself about different things. I became very passionate about holistic health and, things that we can do to naturally support our body. And so many of these things are found in God's Word. And a lot of times we just don't read it from that perspective. But I do think that because I became my own advocate, in a sense, I had to advocate for myself. When the doctors give up on you, what are you going to do? And thankfully I have a chief physician.
Whose report do you believe?
Exactly. I have a chief physician. But I mean, I remember even having the conversation with myself with regarding IVF, if we should go through it or with it or not. I think the internal conversation was, first of all, the doctors did recommend that. When I was so sick, I was more concerned about living. I said that earlier. But when I got to a point where I ended up having a second surgery for IVF, where I discovered how significant the IVF was. When I was originally diagnosed, I didn't know it was severe or anything. I just was told, okay, you're okay. Go try to get pregnant.
I was there.
You were there. And so I remember going to my first IVF appointment and them looking at my chart and like seeing the face change, like, oh. So even the IVF doctor the reproductive doctor kind of seemed unsure. But to make a long story short, I ended up just praying and fasting because I remember that day when I got that report from the physician that there was really nothing we could do. And I remember it was on my birthday. I told you it's my 33rd birthday. And I remember, do you remember coming by and bringing flowers that day? You probably don't even remember it, but you brought me flowers that day. And I was like, oh, at least I have flowers.
Don't make me cry.
But
we said we weren't going to cry.
No, but it was so good because at that moment I had certain things that people did help my faith to kick in. You and Kiana brought flowers to the house, and I remember talking to my mom. She said something. She said, I just don't believe this is for you. And I remember I had been crying all day. And when she said that, it was like, I'm not going to lie. At first, I was just like, oh, but then it was almost like a slap to the face too. Like, okay, this is where faith kicks in. And I decided to go on a fast. And I did not tell anyone at that moment because I knew, well, I may have told you.
Say,
I think I told you, but I didn't tell a lot of people because I know that I just knew there was going to be a lot of concern. Like, you're already sick. Don't put more on yourself. But when you are needing, there's no other option at this point. You need God's divine guidance. And I was already a woman of faith and prayer. So I fasted and I prayed and I got my answer. And that came in the form of God telling me to Google a certain phrase related to endometriosis and a physician. And I came across a name and God said, you need to go to him. When I was looking into that person, it turns out that this person was some type of mega specialist who specialized in the worst cases. And then that doctor who told me they didn't have anyone to send me to, I got a sudden call from her and she said, I thought this person may have been retired, but I want you to check him out. And she gave me his name and that was my confirmation. God had led me to where I needed to go. And once I got to that place, the day I walked into that office, that was the turning point. That was the turning point. Everything else was divinely orchestrated. I knew I was in the right place. And having had the surgery with him, pretty much it was a life-saving surgery. Things had gotten so severe that it was to save my organs. Because
if I remember correctly, it was to literally save your life. Because I think after we researched, and you can expound on this, I think after we did a little research, you realized that as it was growing upward, some cases it went to people's brain. Am I correct?
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that it can occur outside of the uterus and it can spread. And typically after you have the particular surgery that I had, they say that there's, it quickly returns back and maybe more aggressively. And so it made it all the way up to my diaphragm. Yep. It moved things in different places, like displaced some organs. I was having signs. Remember, I told you I had signs of so many different health conditions. I was seeing all these specialists, and it turned out that the endometriosis was attacking certain places in the body and therefore giving me symptoms of certain other conditions I really didn't have. Like, I had one night where I felt like I had appendicitis. It was on my appendix. So having been led to someone, the right person, and they lived in the same city, and God just used used him as an angel. And after that, he was like, now try IVF. And that moment was so special for me because it was confirmation that this was about so much more, and I was going to need to go on a journey. And God was taking me somewhere through experiencing this infertility and health crisis. And with IVF, it ended up becoming like, okay, this is my assignment. This is an assignment for God. And there was so much opposition and spiritual warfare every time we would try to conceive, look into IVF, something big and catastrophic would happen, that I knew that this was an area that the enemy did not want for me, and therefore God did. And so this has to happen. God will make a way and we will do our part.
And it all started with a fast.
It started with a fast.
And for me, I want someone to be encouraged to stop searching for answers from the doctor and make it personal. Make it a personal thing between you and God, and just take some time to fast and pray and watch him open a door that no man can shut. I was there, and I remember that's why I wanted to do this in Acts, like a story, because it's such a beautiful love story. And it just reminds me that anything worth having comes with a fight, and that's anything. So next question. When you, the moment you found out you were pregnant, how did that feel? And I'm asking because as a person of faith, with the type of faith that you have, I'm sure, and you can answer this, I'm saying it, but you can agree or disagree. Did you find as a woman of faith that joy and fear can still coexist when you finally got the word that you were pregnant?
Yeah, and I don't know if for me if I would call it fear, because I felt that once getting that confirmation from God, well, first of all, God told me that this is it. I mean, it was down, and it wasn't just one fast. I fasted all the time because I wasn't playing any games. I needed some clear instruction from God. And when you are just really devoted to his plan and seeing this assignment through, that's how I looked at it. This was an assignment I have to see through to the end. And because I was, during the IVF period, so deeply engrossed in prayer, God was doing so much in my life spiritually. It's like leaving breadcrumbs. There were things in me that God needed to work on to prepare me for that next stage. So part of, going from the waiting period to getting pregnant, that waiting period was so sacred, because that is the time that God prepares you for what's next. And you get to the point where you're not fighting the process, you're working with the process. So, I mean, the spiritual battles were constant, but what I can say that God changed my perspective in that moment, that these battles weren't necessarily they were from Satan, but it was God allowed, because God was using it as a training ground.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
It was a training ground for him to cultivate the things that he needed to cultivate in me. So during that time, I grew in intercession. I grew with fasting, and I also grew in the word. And, I was in literally I could not sleep most nights. I would have spiritual attacks all the time in my dreams, in my sleep. But those things God was allowing, because it was the training ground for him to be able to change my perspective and say, this is what you're dealing with. I'm allowing you to see it. So you see what you're up against. But in that revelation, you see the strategy on how you're going to defeat it. So that may not answer your question all the way.
It did. And this was a moment for me, because we said we weren't going to cry, and now I'm the one doing it. But it's become personal right now, because with the fight that I've had recently, those were the exact words God gave me. This isn't punishment. This is training ground.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get it until I was on the other side of it. And so for somebody today, you need to know this is training ground.
Yeah.
The pressure is real. The problems are real. The fear can be real, but it's only training ground for your next. And when you said that, it just bubbled up in me because those are the exact words God gave me. Joanna, this is training ground. That's all it is.
Yeah.
You're going to make it. So that's my soapbox.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so was there fear? Maybe just, I would rephrase that and say maybe an anxiousness to, see it come to pass. But by that time that I got pregnant, God had revealed to me everything to do. I knew when to try. I knew when to go to IVF. When we started IVF, we were like, oh my gosh, how are we going to pray for it? God's going to figure it out. We get a letter saying, hey, we have more coverage for you for going through this. God showed me even when I was about to conceive, he flooded me with confirmation in private from other people. So there was that comfort knowing that God was directing every little part of the process. And so I had to lean into him more and lean into the training that he was having for me to go through. I had to lean into it and not fight against it and say, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this? Each time there's something for me to learn. How is this going to transform me? I have to lean into it and I can't run from it. And it doesn't feel good. It was many sleepless nights. It was uncomfortable. It was, having to make a lot of sacrifices. So many sacrifices. I left my job. I end up just changing my whole life around right before starting IVF. But in the sacrifice of trading in so many things where it's not about the money, it's not about my plans, I have to release and grieve what I think I should have and what I think I deserve, and wholeheartedly trust him because he's the reason I'm at this point right now. And as I trust him, he will unfold the way, which he did. And by the time I was pregnant, I already knew I was pregnant and God had told me. So it wasn't a surprise. It was just joy. It was just joy.
And when you talk about the fasting and the praying, I immediately thought of the sacrifices that you were having to make, that through the sacrifice, the purpose of fasting and praying is because God is going to give you strategy, and strategy that you wouldn't elsewhere know what to do without that intimate time and that sacrifice that it took for you to understand his strategy and to be able to hear his voice and move with his strategy, and not what the doctors were saying and not what the report was saying, but God, what are you saying? And so a lot of times it takes that. It takes just that you did, what we see, to get to the finish line and to the promise. So as we end Act 2, the last question I want to ask you is, during the time after you got pregnant, what were those silent prayers like that nobody ever heard?
The silent prayers that no one ever heard, I was just praying that I knew God was carrying me in this process. And I think I knew my family and friends were concerned about me because of the health issues I had in the past. But I trusted God, and I think it was not letting any type of fear overtake me or make me think that I'm not going to be here to see my children and that I'm not going to be able to raise, the enemy will start to talk to you. But I could say that those thoughts would try to come, but because God had already overwhelmed me with so many words of affirmation and comfort that he was in control of the process, I was able to really stand on his word for that. And I knew that I was going to give birth to a miracle. I didn't think that after I gave birth that there were going to be some more things happening. But I think that in that moment of just being able to grow a child inside of you, there was a lot of peace. And there was also a lot of, the pregnancy was a little rough physically, and there were some challenges with that. But ultimately, because God had seen me through so much, there was still a peace there. And I was doing what I could to rest in God after so much warring. When you go through so much spiritual warfare, especially after long periods of time, it can weigh on your body. So it was like getting to not the finish line, but almost there. And I think I would just pray for rest and pray for restoration. I would pray for his completion of his assignments, and that I would see it to fruition, to the finish. The job is finished. I really think that it could have been easy for me to focus on maybe concerns that other people had and let that overtake me. But I was very intentional about protecting that peace and protecting my mind when at such a vulnerable state.
Yes. Yes. Story of strength. Okay, we're going to end Act 2 and go to Act 3. And this is where you were in the war room. Here we're going to talk about the birth and the crisis. So the day that Aiden was born, his name is Aiden. The day that Aiden was born, what should have been a day of extreme joy and happiness and celebration quickly took a turn that at that point seemed like for the worse. But we found out it was all part of God's strategic plan in the end. Let's share with the viewing audience what happened right after you gave birth to your beautiful baby boy.
Yeah, so immediately after I gave birth, I got to hold him for like 1 minute. And, they have what they call the second birth, the second delivery, where you have to deliver the placenta. And they were having trouble removing the placenta. And this just continued. They have a certain time frame to get that removed, and it just wasn't coming out. So they grew concerned. By that time, the epidural had worn off, and I was feeling everything as they were trying to remove it manually. I have my cousin, she's a doula, and she was so gracious. She came and helped me during my delivery, and she noticed that there was a lot of blood. And during this time, I was just in excruciating pain as they were trying to remove it. And I remember thinking in my head, I was just trying to stay conscious. And I had a thought in my head, you're going to have a seizure. When I had that thought that I was going to have a seizure, I became fearful, and I started talking to God. I mean, I was praying the whole time anyway. And even during the delivery, you could feel God's presence in the room that day. I mean, we had worship music. It was just beautiful. I couldn't ask for anything more. But I was talking to God as they were working, and I said, I don't want to have a seizure. Opt out, please, God.
And God said, you're going to make it.
Right. He did. He said, it's okay. He said, it's okay. Just let go. I got you. You're okay. And I remember saying, Lord, I entrust my life to you. And then after that, my mother, I just passed out or whatever. My mother said that she knew something told her, the Holy Spirit told her to look at me, and she saw me having a seizure. No one else in the room saw it because they were kind of focused on the blood and trying to remove the placenta, but she saw it, and that's when they rushed me to trauma. It turns out that I had a condition called placenta accreta, and that is when the placenta infuses with the uterus. So it kind of becomes one. So you can't remove it. So when they were pulling out the placenta, they were actually pulling out my uterus. And I remember waking up in trauma, and I could hear so much going on around me. But this is going to sound crazy, but I heard, different things they were talking about. I heard that they ran out of blood. We need more blood. The blood bank doesn't have any more blood. Oh no, like they were panicking. And I remember hearing all that, and you would think when you hear that, you would start panicking. There was a supernatural peace with me. They started laughing at me. They saw me mumbling, and they're like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm just praying. God's going to send more blood. But I mean, I was just in full faith mode. I wasn't scared. I heard that, and I was like, oh Lord, release the resources needed, release the blood. I speak in the name of Jesus. It's going to get where it needs to be in the appropriate time. I started saying things like, Lord, you're my lifeline. You're my bloodline right now. Supply me with whatever I need. The Spirit of the Lord will sustain me in my infirmity. So just all of the scriptures and the Word of God that had already been there just started flowing.
Bubbling over.
Yep. And I wasn't scared. I started thinking about dishes in the sink and the laundry. I was like, did I tell my husband to fold the laundry? I think I need to do that. Just random things while they're sitting here trying to save my life. And I remember just telling all the people in the trauma, hi, thank you all for helping me. You all are so lovely. Like, I think they thought I was delusional, but it was a sense of faith and peace at that point. And then they got me to ICU. When I woke up, I didn't realize the gravity of what happened. I just woke up in good spirits, grateful, thankful. A little cold from having lost so much blood, but very thankful. And then, but even while in the hospital, I had to endure a lot of battles. I had something called fluid overload, and that's when you lose so much blood that they're dumping it back into you. So I want to say throughout my time there, I got like 10 units of blood, and I got multiple units of platelets and plasma. And it takes a while for all of that to kind of come to an equilibrium. And because of that, whenever they moved me to examine me, or we had to go to a procedure or surgery, I would crash. Like everyone, they would call a code. Everyone would run into the room and try to work on me. And I remember that happening. And even during those times, I was just assured that the Lord had me, and I was just leaning on Him. And it's literally riding on the wings of the Lord, riding on faith.
And those are the secret place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And those are the moments that you feel like it's me and you, God, against the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And those are the moments that He proves, if you lean and depend on me, I got it.
Yeah.
I got it. So those encounters are life-changing for faith. And that's why you're here today, because someone needs to hear this story. Every question that I could have asked in Act 3 has already been asked. The one question I would like to end with is just for the viewing audience, from the time that you went through the process of the infertility, the endometriosis, the surgeries, the finding the angel doctor that was sent for you through this process, all of that, from the time that you experienced that to the time that you had the baby to the time that you went into crisis, how many surgeries did you have before you left the hospital? After the birth.
After the birth.
This is because I want the viewing audience to know the crisis that you endured after the birth.
Yeah, I want to say I had about 4.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
So you go from this beautiful experience, this deliverance for what the enemy meant for evil. You understood God meant for you good, for your good. You went from all of that to still entering into a state of crisis for some more days. And that leads me to Act 4 and the next question. What was it like navigating through this season that you finally got what you have prayed for and believed God for so long, and then you had to be separated from your newborn?
I know. Um, it was hard. It was very difficult. When I was in ICU, the staff was so amazing. They made some special exceptions and allowed me to see my baby once I became stable. I think it was on my last surgery there. They brought him in the room and I got to hold him. And as soon as he came in the room, he recognized my voice, and it was so special. But not seeing him for those periods of time, it just I would sit there and have such determination to make it forward, to move out of the ICU. And it was just one thing at a time. I remember when, when I was in the ICU and I couldn't move because anytime I moved, I would crash. I remember I could move my arms. So I remember lifting my arms and praising God that I was where I was.
Alive.
I was alive, but even with that, God ordered my steps. Like, He changed all of our plans. We were supposed to give birth at another hospital. He rerouted our plans where we ended up somewhere that could accommodate the miracle that was about to happen. And I wanted to thank God for what He had already done. And I would just see myself reunited with my baby and all the things that I would get to celebrate. And I began to really just speak over my life and say, I'm going to see those things. I'm going to see the first birthday. I'm going to see, all those things that, and at that point, I had only seen him that 1 minute right after delivery. So it was hard having people kind of tell you about them and show you pictures and you wanting to see. But I was so grateful that I made it through, and it was going to just be temporary. But I needed to work at each step, getting closer and closer to recovery and making sure that I'm focused on the task at hand, because me becoming whole means there'll also be a better life for him. So that was my focus: recovery, staying filled up, walking with God and in faith, and the rest will take care of itself. And I've waited this long.
Absolutely.
I've waited this long, and there will be many years for more.
But you didn't understand that on your training ground, God was preparing your story for someone else's future.
Oh, yes.
So we realize what it was all about now.